Hey everyone, and thanks for checking out another video. Today we're in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on a bitterly cold and windy day. Now at the time I'm recording this, there's about a month left until the ships of the Great Lakes wake from their winter slumber and begin crisscrossing the lakes once more. So today we're going to see as many of those ships in winter layup as we can. And we're going to start here in Milwaukee and then check out several other ports. But first, and I do mean first, we're going to learn about the Stuart J. Court behind me. She's the first 1,000-foot vessel on the Great Lakes, but also at one time one of the shortest ships ever built, at least for a little bit. Now I talked with famed Great Lakes photographer and Know Your Ship's publisher Roger LeLever about the ship. He's one of the few photographers who actually captured a picture of the court before she had her midsection added. Now there will be timestamps for each vessel if you just want to jump straight to the ships.
If you want to check out the ships without any narration and only the sound of the water, I'll include a link to an unlisted video for you. And just like my previous winter layup videos, you'll learn a little bit about each of the ships while we check them out. Now the information comes from Shipwatcher News Great Lakes Ships. Alright, now to the Interlake Steamship Company's Stuart J. Court. Like I mentioned, it was the first Great Lakes vessel to be built at least 1,000 feet in length. Ships this large became possible once the Poe Lock at the Soo Locks was rebuilt in 1968 to handle larger ships. The chamber was upgraded to 1,200 feet long by 110 feet wide. The Philip R. Clark was the first ship to lock through in 1969. The front and back end of the court was built on the Gulf Coast.
And the middle part was built on the Great Lakes in Erie, Pennsylvania. So to get that front and that back up here to join with the middle part, they welded it together to form like a little ship with no middle. They nicknamed it Stubby. In fact, somebody at the shipyard painted on the side a little dotted line that said, "Cut here," when they separated it to put those two sections together.
This is one of the few pictures you'll find of Stubby. It's one of Roger's photographs. You can see the cut here line that he's talking about. Sadly, they didn't keep that line once the ship was built and painted. I asked him what he thought when he first saw Stubby.
Who thought of this? Hey, how did it float? Did it flip over? What's going to happen? But no, it was fine. It was fine.
LeLever says he was following the progress of the megaship as best he could in a world without the internet. He recalls being in Erie, Pennsylvania on a Sunday morning with the founder of the Know Your Ship's book.
And we thought, well, let's drive over by the shipyard and just see what we can see. So we did that. And we got into the shipyard. There wasn't a lot of security at that point. You know, Sundays are always the best day if you're going to do anything like that when there's nobody around. You kind of sneak around. But we went in there, and I got to see the two sections being stuck together, welded together, for lack of a better word.
That wasn't the only ship they would see that day. Another impressive freighter, this one, an integrated tug and barge, was also being built there.
In the Presque Isle, a guy saw us and said, "Hey, you want to come up and take a look?" So, I mean, that was pretty darn impressive. So I got pictures of the building court from the deck of the Presque Isle.
Eventually, he saw the finished boat, all 1,000 feet of it.
I was blown away, but I'll tell you who was blown away more was my grandfather, who had worked on the river and on the docks since 1912 on the St. Mary's River. He looked at that thing and he said, "How does it float? That is so big." He was blown away.
He remembers the first time the newest Queen of the Great Lakes made its inaugural trip through the Soo Locks. This isn't from that day, but it's an early photo of the court from the Know Your Ship's collection.
There were more cars parked down at Mission Point, is like ground zero for boat watchers in the Soo. It was like a football parking lot. There were more cars parked there than I'd ever seen. And the boat came up and it blew a salute, and everybody was absolutely thrilled. I remember the radio station interviewed the captain on what the trip was like. It was a big deal. The radio station had reports for like several days before, monitoring the trip of the first super ship. Newspapers all over the lakes, they covered that whole trip all the way up. I've got all those newspaper clippings.
He says the crew received a few plaques, and that was about it, and then the court went on its way. Hanging plaques outside wouldn't do much to let the world know what a momentous achievement the ship was, so the crew figured out something else to do that.
They've painted a big number 1 on the back, because they were the first 1,000-footer. And they're very proud of that status on that boat.
One of the unique things about the court is its self-unloader. Instead of having a long boom to swing out onto a dock, it has a much shorter unloading system that limits where it can offload its cargo.
It's called a shuttle boom. It comes out a gate there's a gate on either side, so it could come out either side, but it comes out on the port side when it goes into Burns Harbor. And then, as any 1,000-footer, there's a system of belts running underneath the bottom of the ship that carries the cargo out to the unloading boom. And it kind of comes up from the cargo hold, and it's got this like spinning kind of a wheel that helps move the cargo out off the boom. And it seems just like, who invented this? I mean, who had the thought to do this? It works. It works. So, but on the other hand, they never made any more of them either, so works after a fashion.
So what does he think about the ship and its pilot house forward design?
I'll tell you what, that ship is a monster. It's a beast. I love it. So everything on the court in terms of living and eating is all on the front, which is unusual. The stern end is all unloading equipment. So very compact, you're just in the front end there. The funny thing is that the Stuart J. Court, the first 1,000-footer, was not built with guest quarters. Very unusual. No guest rooms, no passenger lounge, no nothing. So when I would go on that boat, I'd have to sleep in a spare room. They had a spare room for technicians that might come along. Mm-hmm. So I slept in a spare room. I didn't care. I just slept on the deck, if I could go for a boat ride.
That's right. He got to ride on the court for several trips.
I was on the court often enough that some of the guys, because they're there year after year, kind of like became family. I mean, I know, hey, welcome back, and I always take a box of books to a boat as a gift. So I would sign books for the crew, and I'd sit in the dining room and maybe work on my laptop in the evening, and the people would come in and out, and we'd chat about various things and how their lives were going and what have you.
He thinks the crew may have just been happy to see a fresh face, or maybe it was just to get a free copy of the Know Your Ships book. I asked him what the crew thought about boat nerds and our fascination with these massive ships.
You have people that understand it, and some of those people are kind of boat nerdy themselves. And then you get other people that just, I don't understand it. It's just a job. Get over it, people. That kind of thing. Get a life. So you have both camps, yeah.
He says the crew uses that massive deck as a walking track.
I love doing laps on the boat, just walking. And the crew on the boat doesn't do that too. They need to get some exercise because the food in the galley is pretty scrumptious. So they walk around and around. The captain has his headset on. He does his laps. Other people do their laps. I do my laps, and it's really nice.
But what about getting on and off such a large ship?
So I just go over to the locks, and when the boat deck is level with the lock deck, I just step on. Very simple. But if I was on the boat and wanted to get off, say in Superior, Wisconsin, or down in Burns Harbor, Indiana, I'd have to climb the ladder. Now, when that boat is not loaded, it's pretty tall. It's a real tall ship, and that's a long ladder up to the top. I would climb it because there's a boat on the other end of it, of course. So, but it is huge. You stand in the middle, exact middle of that ship. Wow. Just so much to the front, so much to the back, and so much to the sides. Just blows my mind.
Leliever's been lucky and able to catch rides on quite a few freighters, including the Joseph L. Block and Wilfred Sykes.
So I did those. I did the K. Barker. I did the James R. Barker at one point. The old decrepit rust bucket Maumee, which was, the captain said, you can take all the pictures you want if you don't show any rust, haha. The St. Mary's Challenger, which was also a steamship, the oldest operating ship in North America before it got cut down to a barge. It was over 100 years old. That was fantastic to see all these steam-operated pieces of equipment in the engine room that you would only see in a museum and not working. These were working. Steam was coming out of these things, and it was all mechanical linkages. It was just absolutely fascinating. And of course, the court. And I'm sure there are others that I've forgotten about. I'd have to review my pictures, but quite a few. Boat rides are very special to me.
Speaking of special, that's how he feels about the Edward L. Ryerson. Unfortunately, the ship dubbed Fast Eddie hasn't ran in more than 15 years. Leliever's ridden on it 3 times.
1960 built, streamlined, the last ship they built with an eye towards how a boat looked as much as to how much it could carry. I don't think there's a square anything on that boat. It's all rounded and curved. To see it come around the corner, it almost looks like a spaceship, like something out of another era, which it kind of is. And it's very deluxe and luxurious to be on as a guest. Also the same with the Wilfred Sykes of 1949, when in those older days, they carried passengers that they wanted to impress. Mm-hmm. Contracts, guests of the company, corporate executives. And the quarters were like you've never seen. They're beautifully paneled in oak and just luxurious in every way. Newer ships, if they have guest quarters, are much more utilitarian.
He says he loves the pilot house forward and the unique styling of the ship.
Just very streamlined, very nice. Also, if you're in the front, in the bow, where the guest quarters are, it's very quiet because it's not a diesel ship. So there's nothing underneath you going rum, 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 all the time. It's like smooth.
As you can tell, Roger's had plenty of smooth sailing for his Great Lakes adventures, and he's taken plenty of pictures along the way. And he wants to see your best photographs of ships too. That's what he uses in the Know Your Ships book.
I like to have pictures by Christmas. That's when I start putting on my KYS hat again and start sorting through that stuff. And they can send them to me at my email, roger@knowyourships.com. The book and the magazine also is available in gift shops on the Great Lakes, U.S. and Canada, all the way out to Montreal. And I have to laugh because we have this crazy quilt patchwork of places that sell the book. So it might be it'll be at your Barnes & Noble. You can get it through Barnes & Noble, but it might also be at a bait shop. I have one. Or a grocery store, or a pasty shop, or a hardware store that's in a town on the river, art gallery. And at the Sewell Ox in Sault Ste. Marie, of course, just about every gift shop in town has it. The same with the Port Huron area down through the St. Clair River. So you can get it at a lot of places, or you can also order it directly from me online at knowyourships.com. Either way, you'll get it pretty easily. And this is pretty much a one-man, two-man show. So if you call me, you talk to me. If you send a check to me, I'm the guy that handles it. Pretty much me. And some volunteers that help. I couldn't do it without my volunteers.
I'd like to give a huge thank you to Roger for sitting down with me and sharing some of his Great Lakes adventures. It truly was a pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed hearing from him as much as I did. If you'd like to learn more about Know Your Ships or order the latest edition, I'll put a link in the description for you. Well, we still have a little more footage of the Stuart J. Court to check out before moving on to our next ships. Alright, well now let's check out some of the other ships in layup. Also, in port with the court are the Joseph L. Block and Wilfred Sykes. Now the Block was built in 1976 in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin for the then Inland Steel Company. She was the third of 4 similar ships built around the same time. The first being the Charles E. Wilson, now the John J. Bolin, then the H. Lee White, and lastly, the American Mariner. Now the Block is 728 feet in length and 78 feet wide. I'll provide links to more detailed histories of each ship in the description. Next up, we have the Wilfred Sykes. She was launched in 1949 by the American Shipbuilding Company in Lorain, Ohio, also for the then Inland Steel Company. Now, the 678-foot freighter was designed to be as large as possible to work the Great Lakes at the time. She set many records in her early seasons on the Great Lakes. The Sykes was converted to a self-unloader in 1975 at Fraser Shipyards in Superior, Wisconsin. Also in port is the GL Ostrander tug and integrity barge. The 136-foot Ostrander was built in 1976 by Halter Marine Services in Louisiana as the Andrew Martin. Now, she was rebuilt in 1996 to push articulated barges. That's when she was given the raised pilot house. Her mate, the 441-foot-long integrity barge, was built in 1996 by Bay Shipbuilding. We find another articulated tug and barge combo, the Albert and Margaret. The tug Albert was built in 1979 by the American Gulf Shipbuilding Company in Harvey, Louisiana. She was extensively reconstructed beginning in 2007 to push articulated barges. And the tanker barge Margaret, well, she's 391 feet in length. Lastly, we have two tugboats that work the harbor, the William C. Selvig and the New Jersey. The former was built in 1944 by Platzer Boat Works for the U.S. Army. Her military service ended 5 years later. After a long private career, from 2021 to 2024, she was leased to the Great Lakes Maritime Academy in Traverse City, Michigan each summer to be used as a training platform for cadets. Her partner, the New Jersey, was built more than a century ago by the Great Lakes Towing Company of Cleveland, Ohio in 1924. It's incredible that more than a century later, she's still on the water. Alright, well that does it for Milwaukee. This was my first time up here, and despite the wind and cold, it was a lot of fun. There's a great little park next to the harbor for you to check out. I hope to make it back up here and explore a little bit more. It seems like a great city. Our next stop is Toledo, Ohio, and boy was she packed. First up, we have the Edwin H. Gott, another 1,000-footer, although she was the 8th footer on the lakes. The 1,004-foot length freighter was built in 1977 by Bay Shipbuilding Corporation. She was launched in July the following year. Ironically, she was built with a similar shuttle-style boom like the Court, but had her current 280-foot boom added in 1996. Next to the Gott is the American Spirit, originally named the George A. Stinson. Now the Spirit was originally launched in 1978 as the 7th 1,000-footer on the lakes, also coming in at 1,004 feet. Now she's the second of 4 sister ships constructed by the American Shipbuilding Company, the others being the James R. Barker, Wasabi Minor, and Paul R. Tregurtha. Now I didn't notice until putting this video together that the Spirit has that unique rounded front like her siblings, just a different paint scheme. Our first pilot house forward ship in Toledo is the John G. Munson. Built by the Manitowoc Shipbuilding Company, she was launched at the end of 1951. The 666-foot ship was the first of 3 sister ships, including the Saginaw and the scrapped Detroit Edison. She had 102 feet added in 1976, bringing her total length to 768 feet. Next, we have our first articulated tug and barge in this port, the Joyce Van Ankvoort and Great Lakes Trader. Joyce was built in 1998 by Bay Shipbuilding. She's been paired with the Great Lakes Trader since 2000. Now, she was the first of 2 similar tugs, the second being the Ken Booth Sr., now the Clyde Van Ankvoort. The tug and barge have a paired length of 840 feet. Next, we have her fleet mate, the Laura Van Ankvoort, originally built as the Sydney Candies in 1994 by Halter Marine in Lockport, Louisiana. By the way, I love that name. Now, unfortunately though, she's been in long-term layup here since 2023. Laura had been paired with the converted barge Joseph H. Thompson. The Thompson though was in need of repairs, so the decision was made to retire and scrap the barge. Laura's been here ever since. Next, we spot the K.E. Barker. She was built in 1952 by the American Shipbuilding Company right here in Toledo. The K. Barker is the sister ship to the Arthur Anderson and Philip Clark, which we'll see in just a bit. Next, we have one of the most famous ships on the Great Lakes, and in my opinion, the most famous that's still operating, the Arthur M. Anderson. Built by the American Shipbuilding Company in 1952, the Anderson has a storied history and is intertwined with the Edmund Fitzgerald. The 647-foot ship was the second of 8 built to the AAA specs, also known as Pittsburgh-class ships. Now, this style of ship is my favorite on the lakes. I love the curves and the pilot house forward. Also tucked into Toledo is the 730-foot American Mariner. She was launched in 1979 by the Bay Shipbuilding Corporation. The Mariner is nearly identical to the Joseph L. Block. Here we see the butt of the Philip R. Clark. It was also built in 1952, and as you can see, it's a twin of the Arthur Anderson. In the CSX Torco dock, we find our first articulated barge that isn't articulated at the moment, the Erie Trader. The 840-foot barge was built right here on Lake Erie by Don John Shipbuilding up in Erie, Pennsylvania back in 2012. She's been paired with the tug Clyde Van Ankvoort ever since being constructed. We get a great view of how the tug and barges fit together. I'd love to see and document the mating process for the two vessels. Here we see the Erie Trader's mate, the Clyde S. Van Ankvoort, built a year earlier, also by the Don John Shipbuilding Company. If you look closely, you can see the lettering for when it was originally the Ken Booth Sr. The Van Ankvoort Company really has specialized in these tug and barge combos. The way I understand it, you need fewer crew members for a tug and barge compared to a traditional freighter. I'd love to know any other differences between their operation. Next to the Clyde, we find her fleet mate, the Dirk Van Ankvoort and barge Michigan Trader. The Dirk is much older, being built in 1990 by Upper Lakes Towing. She's been with the Michigan Trader barge since 2020, the year the barge was built. The Michigan Trader was purpose-built as an articulated barge in Superior, Wisconsin. Well, that covers this portion of Toledo. There are a few other ships in the area, but we're going to need to find a new place to park to see them. Next, we find the Paul R. Tregurtha and Dorothy Ann and Pathfinder Tug and Barge. We'll check out the Dorothy Ann first. She was launched in 1999 by the Bay Shipbuilding Company. The Dorothy Ann has been paired with the Pathfinder barge her entire career. That barge was originally launched as the J.L. Mathey in 1952 by the Great Lakes Engineering Works in River Rouge, Michigan. She was a sister ship to the Anderson, Clark, and near twin to the K. Barker and Armco. She was converted to a barge in 1998 and renamed as the Pathfinder. Up the Maumee River just a bit, we find the Queen of the Great Lakes, the Paul R. Tregurtha. Built as the William J. Delancey in 1981, she was the second of 4 similar sister ships constructed by American Shipbuilding, the others being the James R. Barker, Musabi Minor, and George A. Stinson, now the American Spirit. Now the main difference between this ship and the others is that the PRT is a little more than 7 feet longer, bringing her total length to just over 1,013 feet. She also has an additional cargo capacity of 5,000 tons. Further upriver, we find the American Courage, with the Cleveland Cliffs hot briquetted iron plant standing tall in the background. The 636-foot ship was launched in 1978 by the Bay Shipbuilding Corporation. She's a sister ship to the Sam Laud and Algoma Buffalo and nearly identical to the Great Republic. Speaking of the Great Republic, we find her here in the Ironhead Dry Dock. I'm not sure what type of work she's having done, so hopefully someone can comment below and let us know. Originally built as the American Republic, she was launched in 1980. She's about a foot shorter than the American Courage. Our last ship in Toledo is one that's been here the longest, the Valor or American Valor. It's been here in the Hocking Valley dock since 2019. Originally built in 1953 as the Armco, she's been in troubled waters with an uncertain future. She's been laid up since 2008, being moved around the area before ending up here more than a decade later. I believe the Valor still has her original steam turbine. Her future, though, it's up in the air, as her owner, Lower Lakes Towing, was just purchased by Algoma Central. I think she's a great-looking ship and hope that there's some way that she can be saved and serve on the Great Lakes once more. Well, that does it for Toledo. Our next stop is north of here in the Detroit, Michigan area. The Herbert Jackson is our first freighter in E-Course. The 690-foot vessel was built in 1959, not too far from here at Great Lakes Engineering Works in River Rouge. Beside her, we have the newest generation of Great Lakes vessel, the Mark W. Barker. This Barker departed on her maiden voyage in July of 2022. She features many performance and efficiency upgrades. The Barker is also the first American freighter to be built on the lake since 1981. She's a river-class vessel at 639 feet, meaning she can navigate tight and twisting waterways like the Cuyahoga River. In fact, she was called to service a month early to run iron ore shuttles to the Cleveland Cliffs steel mill. Now, this freighter features 5 hydraulically controlled stackable hatch covers similar to what you'd see on a Salty. It also has a flat-bottom cargo hold to maximize capacity and carry uniquely shaped cargoes like wind turbine blades. Upriver, we find the Samuel de Champlain tug and Innovation barge. Now, the tug was built in 1975, but rebuilt in 2006 to connect with the Innovation, a cement barge. Together, the pair are 544 feet in length. As we head toward our next ship, check out the tug Erica Kobasic. She was built in 1939 for the U.S. Coast Guard as the Arundel. She was decommissioned in 1982 and began her private service later that year. Next, we find the Iver Bright. The 2012 built vessel is an oil chemical tanker measuring more than 360 feet in length. She's a very colorful and interesting looking ship. I just couldn't find much information on her. Here we see the Ambassador Bridge with Detroit in the background. This really is such a beautiful sight. One more look at the bridge and we'll check out the vessels in Windsor, Canada. On the east side of the Detroit River, we have several vessels from the McKeel family. We'll start with the Cathay McKeel, and then you'll see the Evan Spirit, and then lastly the Harvest Spirit. There's also a McKeel-owned tug called Stormont that we'll see just before finishing up here. I'd be remiss if I didn't get a shot of the Gordie Howe International Bridge. This really is a beautiful work of art. This style seems to be popping up anytime a new bridge is being built. What do you think of it? Our next stop has us back on Lake Erie, this time in Erie, Pennsylvania. That's the JS St. John you're looking at. She started life as a military vessel. The St. John was built as a tanker for the U.S. Navy in 1945. She served until 1953 before being sold into private service, where she operated as a tanker for 13 years. Then in 1967, she was converted into a suction hopper dredger and still does that to this day. Behind her, we find the Calumet. She was built in 1973 down the Erie coast in Lorain, Ohio. The Calumet is the first of 3 sister ships, the second being the Manitowoc, and then the Robert S. Pearson. We then spot the American Integrity tucked away at the Don John Shipbuilding Dry Dock, although it's not dry right now. She started life at 1,000 feet in 1978 as the Lewis Wilson Foy. She's the second of several sister vessels, including the Walter J. McCarthy Jr., Indiana Ann Burns Harbors, and the American Century. We find another tug and barge, this one a 1,000-footer, the Presque Isle. She was the second 1,000-footer on the lakes following the Stuart J. Court. This tug and barge is an integrated unit and not an articulated one, meaning the tug fits into a specifically designed notch to lock in and form a rigid connection, unlike the articulated barges which are connected but can move up and down independently. Great Lakes historian Brendan Falkowski says this was to take advantage of the lower tug and barge worker requirement, but because the tug is not seaworthy on its own, it must operate with a full crew like a traditional freighter. What do you think of the Presque Isle? I think it's a pretty neat comet and hope to see it in action this summer. Well, that does it for Erie. Now we're heading down the coast and making a few stops on the way. First up is Conneaut, Ohio, where we find the Roger Blau. The Blau is one of my favorite ships. Unfortunately though, I've never seen her on open water and probably never will. She was built in Lorain, Ohio in 1972 and is 858 feet in length. The Blau is the last US-built ship to have her pilot house forward. She features a shuttle-style boom just like the Stuart J. Court. The Roger Blau has had quite a bit of bad luck though, and a fire in 2021 is probably the final nail in the coffin for this grand ship. I guess never give up hope though until she's scrapped, right? We're now in Ashtabula, just down the road. We first spot the barge Menominee, originally built in 1952 as the Sparrows Point and then converted to an articulated barge in 2006. She's been paired with the Olive Elmore ever since. The two are a combined 728 feet in length. Her tug is in there somewhere. Next up is the 704-foot H. Lee White. The 1974 built White is the second sister ship of several we've already seen, including the Joseph L. Block and American Mariner. In front of her, we find the Sam Loud. She's the sister ship of the Algoma Buffalo, American Courage, and Great Republic. The 634-foot Loud was the first of the four ships. Here we get a good look at the notch in the back of the Menominee barge. Now we see the two tugs, the Defiance closest to us and the Olive Elmore behind her. Now the Defiance has been paired with the barge Ashtabula, which is in front of them. The Ashtabula was constructed as an articulated barge, while the Olive Moore has been with the Menominee. As we fly by, notice the unique cargo hatch covers on the Ashtabula. Now let's check out the 2-footers in port. We have the American Century up first. This 1,000-footer was the last to enter service on the Great Lakes. She's the sister ship of the American Integrity, Indiana Harbor, Burns Harbor, and the ship next to her, the Walter J. McCarthy Jr. You'll see her in a few upcoming videos, including loading coal at the Midwest Energy Terminal in Superior, Wisconsin, before it closes in 2026. The Walter McCarthy Jr. was the 5th 1,000-footer built, but the first footer by Bay Shipbuilding. She started life on the lakes as the Belle River. Also in port here we find the tug Invincible. Unfortunately though, she's been on long-term layup since 2012 when it was determined that repairs to her mated barge, the McKee Suns, were just too costly to make. She arrived here in 2018, but as far as I can find, no work has been done to her and she'll continue to remain idled. Our last ship in Ashtabula is the 1973 built Manitowoc. She's the sister ship of the Calumet and Robert S. Pearson. The 630-footer is another example of a river-class vessel designed with the Cuyahoga in mind. We have one more winter layup stop to make. We're going to see the Alpena in Cleveland. Talk about a classic Laker. This ship started off as the Leon Fraser in 1942. She was built by the Great Lakes Engineering Works in River Rouge, Michigan. Originally built as a 639-foot bulk carrier, she was rebuilt in 1990 to haul cement. When converted, she was shortened 120 feet. She really is such a beautiful freighter. hope to catch her out on open water this summer. Well, that does it for this year's winter layup portion. I do have one more ship to show you though. I made a few trips to the Duluth Superior area in the summer and fall of 2025. I was able to squeeze in a quick stop to check out the Edward L. Ryerson. I'd heard a lot about this ship and wanted to see it in person, and wow, did it not disappoint. Talk about a beautiful ship. The styling looks like someone designed it from the future with all of its curves. She's been laid up here though since 2009, and I'm not hopeful of ever seeing her out on the Great Lakes again, but I will keep my fingers crossed and root for this one to return somehow. Well, that really does it. I hope you enjoyed seeing all these ships. I sure had a lot of fun recording them and learning a little bit about their histories. I'd love to know if you have a favorite ship and why. I have plenty of other shipping videos in the works, so I do hope you'll check those out when I publish them. Until then, I hope you have a great day.